In today's program, I interview Peter Kling. In this presentation, he reveals the 5 scriptures which prove that Nibiru will return in what we call the Nibiru prophecy of 2017. Now, before we start, I suggest you grab yourself a cup of tea, get a nice, comfortable place to relax, because you're not going to want to move anywhere during this next hour with Peter Kling. The man is absolutely fascinating. This is one of the best outings he's ever done. It's a great show. Enjoy the program. Peter Kling, welcome back to the program.
Always a pleasure, Russell Scott. Always a pleasure.
According to Wikipedia, the existence of Nibiru, or Planet X, is not supported by any scientific evidence and has been rejected by astronomers and planetary scientists as pseudoscience and an internet hoax.
Well, here's the thing. I used to be one of those skeptics. So, when Stitchin's work first came out, I was kind of critical, and I'm like, okay, I got to look into this a little bit more. And I'm talking about Zachariah Stitchin, and I should say not when it first came out, when I first became knowledgeable of it. And I actually went back to the Sumerian text and looked for the meaning of the word Nibiru to begin with. And the word Nibiru means crossing, as in to cross the street or to cross a river. It's not something that is going to impact the world or the earth. But when I first read this and Planet X was all coming out and being talked about, and I was like, wait a minute, there's more to this than what's going on, because this is a crossing. And at the time, this was, I guess, probably around 2010, I'm thinking, that I was investigating this. And at this time, we were looking forward to the crossing or the progression of the equinoxes and crossing the elliptic plane of the galaxy. And this made a lot more sense to me as far as crossing, because as we cross the elliptical the plane of the galaxy of the Milky Way, I theorized that if we're in one magnetic section now, if you're at the lower pole now and we're crossing over to the upper pole, what is going to happen to the magnetic effects of not just planet Earth, but the whole solar system? So I was approaching it from the progression of the equinoxes and our travel through space, as opposed to a binary star system. Well, so I was kind of debunking this Nibiru idea with the idea of a crossing, one that, where we would be crossing the plane here, the galactic plane, and run into a possible situation as far as problems here on Earth. Because those problems, especially earthquakes, because all the earthquakes get documented, and we can go back to 1998, actually. And between 1998 and 1999, significant earthquakes that measured a magnitude of 5 or above, increased by 500%, actually just slightly over 500%. And they've been increasing over since then. So now, why all of a sudden, between 1998 and 1999, do we have this huge increase in earthquakes with no real reason to suspect anything? And when I looked at that data, and I'm looking at, crossing the galactic plane here, I'm thinking, okay, this could be a good sign, because this isn't something that just, we got over 10 years of data here when I was looking at it. This isn't something that's happening all of a sudden. I figured, 10, 15 years into it, another 10, 15 years back out of it, somewhere thereabouts. And so this all kind of made logical sense, a lot more sense than a planet or, coming by here that is supposed to be carrying aliens on it and revisiting Earth and, so forth and so on. All the different things that were, when I say aliens, the Anunnaki is who I'm actually referring to. But, as a scientist, you can't really be just dogmatic about anything. You have to continue to look at supporting evidence, especially with something unknown, because what I proposed was just a theory. There's no real way to hook up the earthquakes to us crossing the galactic plane. And so we come to Nibiru. Well, what had actually started making me come to the idea that this ninth planet did exist is that I was actually watching a documentary. I think it was like on the Discovery Channel or Science Channel, something like that. And they were talking about all the different atmospheres that they knew about within our solar system. And, they referred to ours, and then they went to the atmosphere of Mars and different, got to Jupiter, and Jupiter's a gas planet, and Neptune, and how, the atmosphere is actually crushing and so forth. And through the whole process, all of a sudden, they start talking about a brown dwarf star. And they said the brown dwarf star does indeed have an atmosphere, and as a matter of fact, on a brown dwarf star, it rains iron. And I'm thinking, why are they talking about a brown dwarf star when they're only talking about planets within the solar system? And this made absolutely no sense. And, it's like, there's a rule, actually, Yahuwah, God, Yahweh, essentially said, I will not cause anything to happen without telling my prophets first. And so, we get what's called, programming, but there's a predictive programming where, I'll give you a good for instance. The Simpsons does a great amount of programming. Now, either they know what's going on in the world, or they're able to hit some things right on the head. And many of us can just think back just a few months ago. If you saw this little clip from The Simpsons where Donald Trump becomes president, he's running for president. He's actually coming down an escalator at one point in the Simpsons movie, and in real life, he's coming down an escalator. And not in the movie, but in the Simpsons series, and in both scenes, there's a card that, or like a little placard that was put up on a glass railing there that falls, and it falls in the Simpsons, and it falls in real life as Trump's coming down the escalator. It's like, wait a minute, what is this? So you have to, when these things occur, you have to scratch your head a little bit. Now, interestingly enough, Simpsons also has in one of their episodes where they go visit New York, and they're diving in New York City, and they're diving, and it's underwater. New York City is underwater. So there's this Homer and Marge waving from the skyline or from the top of New York City, but they've got scuba gear on. Now, there's a reason why I brought this in, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. So when this documentary came out, and they're talking about this brown dwarf star, how it's an iron star in the last phases of its life, how it rains iron. Not only does it rain iron, its atmosphere is all full of iron oxide or rust, and it actually leaves a trail of debris in its way. And I'm thinking, why are they talking about an iron star, a brown dwarf star in our atmosphere? With everything that they're talking about, it sounds like the sun with wings, Nibiru, or what we call Nibiru. So now I had to take it a little bit more serious, because you don't do a whole documentary and slip in this red dwarf star in with all the planets of Earth unless it actually is there and is pertinent. That would seem logical, correct? So when I get confused about something, really confused about something, I hit the scriptures. And I use a reference Bible, so it makes life a little bit easier. And I go online and I use online Bibles, so I get cross references. And I go back to what they're saying about this Nibiru crossing, and I think back of Exodus. And a lot of people made that same connection. Oh, well, in Exodus, and so you go back to Exodus, and it's interesting. Exodus itself is quite an interesting book because it is the exodus of the Israelites, who were essentially one big large family at the time, but they were essentially Egyptian too. It is their exodus from Egypt. God collected his people under the Abrahamic covenant who were residing in Egypt, and as it is written, he raised up a nation out of Egypt. And there's the nation that comes out of Egypt. It went in as 12 brothers, but it came out a mighty nation. Oh, they spent 400 years there. Anyway, when we read the book of Exodus, it is our liberation. It's a passion play for our time now. And this is something that I was well aware of. And if we look at the different things that have happened in Exodus, except for the falling, burning hail, pretty much everything else has happened on this planet, right up to where we are with Plague 9. Plague 9 is actually when the earth becomes darkened, and it stays dark for 3 days. It's Revelation. Revelation. Yeah, it's going to get dark there too. But this is actually found in Exodus, the 10th chapter, for anybody who wants to look it up. And it starts off in the 21st verse. Your Bible will probably read the Lord God, or something like that. But mine says Yahweh then says to Moses, stretch out your hands toward the heavens so that they may be darkened over the land of Egypt, and a darkness so thick that it could be felt. Moses immediately stretched out his hands toward the heavens, and there was a dense darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. They did not see one another, and none of them got up from where they were for 3 days. Now, this is interesting. It says, but all the Israelites had light in their dwellings. All the Israelites had light in their dwellings. Now, Egypt is made up of Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and it was Lower Egypt where the Israelites lived, on the plains of Giza in the land of Goshen, as it was called, kind of where the Giza Plateau is, where the Great Pyramid of Giza exists. Interestingly enough, when you do the research on the Great Pyramid of Giza, you find out that it is not Egyptian. The Great Pyramid of Giza, if you keep an open mind and look at it, especially when it comes to the pyramid inch, is Judeo-Christian. And hence there's another scripture, I believe also in Isaiah, that says, I shall raise up a monument out of Egypt. Now, Richard Hoagland, and several others since then, but Hoagland did mentioned it the first, is that, in my recollection, is that the pyramids that were built by the Egyptians and by Mesoamerica and great civilizations around the planet, these pyramids were actually like giant antennae. And Hoagland actually he went down to South America and visited some of the pyramids there, and he was using an old Bulliver watch. It was one of the first quartz crystal watches that came out. And he had it modified up to some other machinery because it was the movement of the quartz, it was the vibration of the quartz crystal is what they were actually using to measure the energy that they found at these pyramids. And it actually affected the pyramids themselves. As they would go up the pyramids, it would affect the vibration of the quartz crystal, and they could measure that. So the question is, how does that happen? Unless these things are, big giant antennas of some sort. And there's been all, pyramid law about how nothing deteriorates inside of a pyramid, but the Great Pyramid of Giza, to the best of that everyone can figure, all the archaeologists, it was never used as a burial tomb. And there are no hieroglyphs inside the pyramid. So this raises the question, if it is an antenna, and it says the Israelites had illumination in their homes, how is this possible? It doesn't say they had lamp oil, because the homes in Upper Egypt were totally dark. But the Israelites had some sort of illumination in their home, and we have what is called the Baghdad battery and possibly light bulbs. So did they have a little bit more advanced technology than what we thought they had? Or maybe the Great Pyramid of Giza was sucking up the energy from whatever darkened the sun for 3 days, and as in a giant Tesla coil, was transmitting that energy to whatever the Israelites used in their home for illumination. So we can't rule any of these things out once we start examining this closer. So there is this record of the sun being darkened. Now, while I haven't read the Coburn Bible, I have listened to people who are experts in it, and they say that during this same time there were great earthquakes going on, which were the Coburn Bible is the Egyptian Bible, essentially, or Bible that was written in ancient Egypt. And there were also flooding events along the coasts at this same time that was going on of the Exodus. There's one thing that I made myself very aware of when I started my research back around 1980, 81. And that is, actually, there's a couple of different rules I set up. Number one, the Bible is a need-to-know book. It's only going to tell you what the intelligence behind the writing of the scriptures wants you to know. Also, it is written by a people with limited amount of technological verbiage. In other words, you're not going to find any technological words in the Bible. Although the Book of Enoch isn't one of the books of the Bible in most cases. I believe in the Catholic Douay it is, and there might be one other translation out there that has the Book of Enoch in it. But interestingly enough, Enoch says that he met entities that could turn from the form of fire into the form of man and back to the form of fire again. Now, what exactly is the form of fire? Just like, you light up a lighter or a stove, or is it some sort of energy field, energy force? And you have to wonder about this, because I myself have seen these energy fields or forces, and a lot of information is coming out about the blue orbs, or what people see as just white light UFOs, are indeed living creatures, living life forms made of pure energy. So this has yet to be proven, but it is an intelligent life force of some sort. Now, was it white orbs or energy orbs, red orbs, something like the form of fire that Enoch saw? We don't know. But Enoch talked about it as the form of fire. So when we read the Bible, we have to examine the words carefully. But more so than examine just the words, you look at the event, the results of the event. Now, the sky was darkened, and what happened? Well, it doesn't say a whole lot in the scriptures about this. It doesn't say a whole lot about Nimrod's kingdom, the Sumerians, and the Anunnaki either. It gives Nimrod essentially 2 sentences, 1 short paragraph, and yet he was the king of all of Samaria up until Syriamus had him done in and she became queen. But, history will support, and archaeology supports what is written within the Bible. As a matter of fact, within the last several months, about 6 months ago, I was listening to an archaeologist from Israel, and he said, we don't put a shovel in the ground until we go read the scriptures first. I was like, makes sense to me. They read the scriptures, they track down the event, they see where the event happened, and that's where they go look. X marks the spot, I guess. So when we continue to examine the scriptures, we shed more light on the subject. So we've got this passing in Exodus, and it's interesting too, that the 10th plague uh, involves an alien life form called the angel of death, or the destroying angel. And then when we continue to read the book of Exodus, as the Israelites leave Egypt, rather, sorry, uh, the Egyptians decide to take pursuit. The Pharaoh sends out his army to recapture the Israelites. He changed his mind, and this was after the 10th plague of the firstborn being put to death by the destroying angel. Well, there's a pillar of light that stops Pharaoh's army. What was this pillar of light? It's a pillar of fire, actually, that came down from the clouds that blocked Pharaoh's army from progressing. It was a laser beam? Some sort of energy field? We don't know. But it parted the Red Seas, not the light itself. Some force parted the Red Sea. And yes, there's actually a place that they have. It's not the Reed Sea at the northern end of the Red Sea. It's one of the fingers that come out of the main body of the Red Sea that go up toward into Egypt. There's a shallow area there. It's about 50 feet deep, and it falls off to over 200 feet on each side of this shallow area. I think it's actually close to 300 feet on the one side. And they have found the remnants of chariots and horse bones at this location underwater. National Geographic first uncovered the story about 20 years ago. Interesting, there's a plaque on the other side of this area that says, basically, we crossed here. So, and it's a 3,000-year-old plaque that was erected there. It's on the east bank of this area, and it says quite plainly that this is where the children of Abraham, or the Israelites, had crossed. So, and then for the next 40 years, they're covered by a cloud as they wander through the wilderness. And this isn't just a few people. It's estimated that there's well over 2 million people during this time that this cloud is covering, and this cloud feeds them every day with bread from heaven, what was called manna. So we can't ignore the fact that there was extraterrestrial life forms involved in this Exodus. So let's go a little bit more forward. We're gonna actually. I was gonna go to the book of Malachi, but we're gonna go to the book of Acts first. Acts is kind of interesting. Acts, the second chapter, and this is during the time of the Pentecost, and this is when God's Spirit was poured out upon the 120 in this upper room, and they started to speak in different languages, as in tongues, as it says, and they were accused of being drunk. And the apostle Peter stepped up and he said, "Look, it's the 11th hour." In other words, it's still morning time. It's like 11 o'clock in the morning, and he said, "These people aren't drunk. It's too early in the day for them to be drunk." He said, "But this is exactly what the prophet Joel said would happen." And in Acts, the second chapter, starting with verse 17, after Peter says that this is what the prophet Joel said would happen, Joel said, "And in the last days, God says, I shall pour out some of my spirit on every sort of flesh, and on your sons and on your daughters, and they will prophesy. And your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. And even upon my male slaves and upon my female slaves I will pour out some of my spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. And I will give wonders in the heaven above and signs on earth below, blood and fire and clouds of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood before the great and illustrious day of Yahweh comes." Very important. Verse 21. "And everyone who calls on the name of Yahweh shall be saved." Interesting. everyone who calls on the name of the Creator here, everyone who calls on the name of Yahuwah, which is the ancient Hebrew name, or Yahweh, the modern name, Jehovah, the American or English name, or any one of those three, will be saved according to this scripture. And when will they be saved? During this time that the sun will be turned to darkness and the moon into blood. Okay, a little odd, but let's continue to follow. If we drop back and we go to the book of, into the Gospels, the book of Matthew, Jesus is talking to his apostles. They want to know when his coming is going to be. And there's a whole list of things that he prophesied would take place, many of which that we see going on, including an increase in earthquakes, reports of wars in one place after another. Now, we're not in war here in the United States, but we're hearing reports of wars, and we've been hearing reports of wars since, 2001, 2002. When do we invade Iraq and Afghanistan?
Just after 9/11.
Yeah.
And then you've got Mikhail Gorbachev saying the world is preparing for war, just recently.
Well, if we go back, we don't have to go back that far. And I'm sure most people miss this because Americans don't give a rat's hiney about what comes out of the United Nations. And we're going to talk about this too in a little bit more detail after we're done going through these scriptures. In 2014, the United Nations unanimously, the General Assembly of the United Nations declared world war on extremism. Now, they were very careful about the way that they worded this because they didn't want to get any terrorist groups upset. Or, Islam had a real big problem with the way that the wording was being laid out. So this world war is against extremism. So if you're a Christian and you're labeled as an extremist, guess what? You're technically at war with the United Nations. But along with the same thing, we've had the Obama administration for the last 8 years, which has sold the United States out. And if you believe that, well, they have found that his birth certificate was a forgery. So there's still no real U.S. birth certificate issued for Obama, which means that during the Obama administration, the United States was under the control of outside interests. If Obama was not an American, born in America, then who got him into the White House? Who got him past all the scrutiny? And he carried out someone else's agenda. It was not an American agenda. So look at politics today and you'll figure out why there's such a split. Anyway, somebody by the name of Soros comes to mind, but let's get back to our subject. When we go back to Matthew, besides the wars and reports of wars and famines and everything that Jesus had listed throughout Matthew, the 24th chapter, we get to verse 29, where he says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will beat themselves in grief, and they will see the Son of... Now, why would they beat themselves in grief? It's judgment time. And it's interesting, it says, they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he will send out his angels with a trumpet sound, and they will gather his chosen ones from the four winds, from the extremity of the heavens to the other extremity, from one extremity of the heavens to the other extremity. These aren't human favored people that he's gathering. This is as what is called in Revelation, the 21st chapter, the armies of heaven that he's gathering from one end to the other end. All of the cosmos is coming to visit Earth. And so this is the time of the judgment period. And it goes right back to this great tribulation, the sun being darkened and the moon not giving its light. So here we're getting into a repeat of what happened in Exodus. See, because there's a lot of other scriptures within the Christian Greek scriptures which say when you see these things happening, lift yourselves erect because your deliverance is getting near. So Nibiru or Planet X is nothing to fear. It's like, as it said, labor pains. As a matter of fact, that prophecy says whenever it is that the nations are declaring peace and security, then the end will be upon them instantly, just as the labor pains of a pregnant woman, and they shall by no means escape it. Now, there's another scripture, which I'm going to go back. This one's in the Hebrew scriptures. It's Malachi, the 4th chapter. And this is interesting, the way that this is worded. It's starting with the first verse. It says, "For look, the day is coming that is burning like a furnace, when all the presumptuous ones and all those practicing wickedness will become like stubble. The coming day will certainly devour them, says Yahweh of armies, and it will leave neither root nor bough, but will destroy them totally. But to you who honor my name, the Son," and it's spelt S-U-N, "of righteousness will shine forth with healing in its wings." Wings? The Son of righteousness with wings? It says, "And you will skip about like fattened calves." In verse 3, it's interesting. It says, "And you will tread the wicked underfoot, for they will be like dust under the soles of your feet on the day when I take action, says Yahweh of armies." So, again, the day is coming that is burning like the furnace, and it involves a sun with wings. But here's the thing, and I want to point this out because you have one event which has two different outcomes. Let's go back and examine this. It says that those presumptuous ones and all those practicing wickedness will become like stubble, and they will be burned up, and neither root nor branch would be left. So the whole family tree would be gone. Their mighty tree-like organizations will be cut down and not just burned from the top up, but from the bottom down. Total destruction. You don't get anything back when you burn it. So this is what happens to the wicked and the presumptuous. But it goes on to say, but on you who honor my name, the Son of Righteousness will shine forth with healing in its wings. So how do one group of people become destroyed, totally burned up, and the other group fare well? As a matter of fact, they become strengthened. They become strong, like young bulls, young calves. How does one event have two different outcomes? Here's the key. It's one of the questions that I asked myself several years ago when I uncovered this little beauty. It has to do with our thinking capability and how our brain actually works. Our brain vibrates actually from gamma, which is off the charts, down to about 30 cycles per second, then into beta, which is from 30 down to about 13 cycles, and then alpha, which is from 12 down to 9. You go into beta at theta, theta, at 8 cycles down to 4, and from 4 cycles to 0, you're in delta. Now, as the vibration of the brain slows down, we become less conscious of our outside world, our physical three-dimensional world, and more conscious of other realms. The subconscious goes to a dream realm. But here's the thing. When we look at the beta state of mind and the alpha state of mind, now your brain is vibrating from above 12 hertz. And it is in beta where the response for fight or flight it resides. It's also where fear lives. So if we are in beta, we are in a very reactionary state of mind. We are ready to either fight or run. And chances are we're in a state of fear too, because we might be literally fighting for our lives. So that's beta. If we go down to alpha, you don't experience that. We cannot experience beta responses when we are not in beta. In alpha is where we pray. It's where we meditate. It's where we daydream. It's where we make love. It's where we do problem solving. If you're trying to figure out a problem and you say, I need quiet, I got to work on this, and your brain's working away, and I promise you, you're an alpha. And it's in alpha where we love and pray and where we can connect to the higher power of God or Yahweh or Yahuwah itself and draw power from that energy source into our own personal lives. And it is in alpha where we start also to meditate. Now you can meditate and pray both in theta and delta if you can hold on in delta. But when we are in theta, we are no longer aware of the world around us. The 3D world vanishes. Yeah, we can be brought back. But it's kind of like sleeping. You ever fall asleep and like the TV's playing, all of a sudden, you've been asleep for a while and you're starting to wake up and all of a sudden you hear the TV and it's like, why's the TV on? If you've had that happen, you're coming out of a state of theta. In theta, your consciousness or our consciousness is no longer subject to the laws of the third dimension, the physical laws. We actually live in dimensions 8, 9, and 10. Those are the physical dimensions, not 1, 2, 3. It's just that these are the first 3 we found. We didn't know the other 7 existed until they came up with string theory. And that makes a lot of sense because string theory says there's 7 other spatial planes which need to exist. And so now we can talk about heaven and the rest of the cosmos, the physical and the spiritual. And that's why you have 7 as God's number. 10 is given to man as earthly completeness. 7 is spiritual completeness. So in order to get to the 10 earthly completeness, you have to add the 3 physical dimensions. And now we can talk about earthly or physical completeness, all 10 dimensions combined. It's just that we're infants and we're not aware of those other 7 dimensions. At least the vast majority of us aren't. We talk about, the ascended masters. Come on, every one of us can be an ascended master. All you have to do is learn how to meditate properly and get down into theta and delta. Then you'll understand what an ascended master is. However, that usually takes quite a bit of time, and you can't really say energy because you're not really using energy to do this. It just takes time to practice and to be able to go down into those states. But the more you do it, the faster you can change states of mind. So when we go back and look at what it says here in Malachi, where these wicked and presumptuous don't have enough intelligence to get out of a state of beta, they'll wind up killing each other off. Us who can stay in a state of alpha, connected to love, connected to our Father in prayer. Remember, all those who call on the name of Yahweh or Yahuwah or Jehovah shall be saved. So and in order to do that, guess where you need to be? In alpha, most of the time, but you can do it in beta. But if we're in prayer, where are we? In alpha. So it's having the ability to remove ourselves from the fight and flight syndrome, and we're gonna bring this up more a little bit later as well, but to remove ourselves from that and get into a state of alpha where we can think and plan our futures out clearly. Trust me, if you wind up in a mob, there's a good chance you're going to think like the mob and be involved in mob activity, and the mob is going to eat you up and spit you out. Or the authorities will, one or the other. But if we have an Nibiru or this Planet X coming by and it does what a lot of people are claiming is going to do, it's going to cause an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, that will take down the electric grid of the whole entire world. Maybe that's why the United States did a study several years ago to see what would happen if the grid went down. I don't know if you remember, but it was, I believe, the fall of 2013 when the government came out and said that they were going to do a nationwide test of the electric grid. And everybody was freaking, or I should say everybody, a lot of people were freaking out, saying, oh, they're going to take the grid down. They're going to take the grid down. Wait a minute, they're just testing it. We've got a lot of Chicken Littles out there. We have to get more evidence here before we can say anything. But the reason why they were testing the grid was because of the results that they got back from their research, which said that if the grid was down for 2 years, that 90%, let me say that again, 90% of the population of the United States would be dead. That was the government report. So you can't save us all, is the way that the government looks at it. So we'll save the select few and go into underground bunkers while the rest of those bottom feeders can sit up on the surface and be annihilated or annihilate each other after this thing passes. And so we know all about these underground cities, which takes us to Revelation. Revelation, the 6th chapter. Revelation is probably the most descriptive out of all of the prophecies that have to do with the blood moon and the sun being turned to darkness. But before we read this, I want to go back and address one situation which I actually started talking about. It's funny, I start pushing stuff out into the realm sometimes, the public realm, and all of a sudden it becomes the latest and greatest found knowledge. Unfortunately, I never get credit for it, but whatever. It was in 2010 that I actually got irritated with a New Ager at that time it was October of 2010, as a matter of fact, because people were posting a lot of stuff about 10, 10, 10 on my Facebook page, and it was irritating me. And I was like, yeah, okay. And the person that was doing it the most, I finally said, yeah, I got 10, 10. I understand 11, 11, 11. I even understand 12, 12, 12. I said, but what we need to be careful of is 3, 13, 13, and 4, 14, 14. And I said it, and I typed this out, and I was in a state of anger. I really was, because I had just gotten irritated to the point. And then I thought, why did I say 3, 13, 13, and 4, 14, 14? And so I started more research. Now, I couldn't find a darn thing for 3, 13, 13. Not a thing. But 4, 14, 14 was an eye-opener, and it was an eye-opener in many, many, many ways, because it was the first time, well, first of all, it was going to be a full lunar eclipse on 4/14/14, but not only was it going to be a full lunar eclipse, it was also the date of Passover. It was also the date of Christ's death, the memorial of his death, when he offered the wine and the bread to the 12 apostles as a covenant for a future kingdom. Not a religion, a kingdom. We have to get our terminology straight here, because religion has nothing to do with this. Religion has destroyed the scriptures and the meaning of them both, at least in the vast majority of cases. And they don't cover that Christ is coming back to set up his kingdom. As a matter of fact, even the Pope has come out and said, Christ isn't coming back. Christ was a failure. We need to have a one-world religion. Pope, I got news for you. According to Revelation, we ain't going to have any religion. It's going to be destroyed before Christ returns. Maybe that's where you're so concerned. But anyway, not only was it a full blood moon, but it was also the same date that the calendar that we use lines up with the Hebrew calendar. It was Nisan it was the 4th of Nisan, and it was the 14th of Nisan. It was also the 14th of April. And so these days all of a sudden were lining up. Now, but it wasn't just the first blood moon. It was the first of a tetrad blood moon. In other words, four total lunar eclipses, all classified as blood moons without any partial lunar eclipses in between. Now, here we go to the next level. All 4 of those lunar eclipses happened on Hebrew holidays. Passover in 2014 and 2015, which is Nisan 14 on the Hebrew calendar. Also Rosh Hashanah in 2014 and 2015, the Jewish New Year, were both eclipsed by full blood moons. Not only that, but in between those blood moons were solar eclipses, 4 of them. And one of them was a total eclipse. So the sun was turned to darkness and the moon was turned to blood. Now, oddly enough, we can go back actually to Matthew, the 24th chapter here for a second. And this is something that caught my eye, and I would hope that it caught everyone else's eye. Jesus said this in Matthew, the 24, the 15th chapter, the 15th verse, 24th chapter. He said, therefore, and he's talking to his disciples here and telling them what the signs would be. He said, therefore, when you catch sight of the disgusting thing that causes desolation as spoken about by Daniel the prophet, standing in a holy place, and it says in every Bible, in quotation or in brackets, let the reader use discernment. Then let those in Judea begin fleeing to the mountains. Let the man on the housetop not come down and take his goods out of his house, and let the man in the field not return to pick up his outer garment. So it was like, get out of town quick. Now, in the 1st century, history bears out that in 67 CE, the Romans came in to Jerusalem. They surrounded the city. They laid siege to it. They undermined the temple wall and came up inside the most holy. When you catch sight of the disgusting thing that causes desolation, standing in a holy place, head for the mountains. It was in September of 2015 that the Roman general came with his army. The Roman general I'm talking about is Pope Francis. And he stood in the White House. He stood in the Capitol and dictated to our leaders what they needed to be doing. And then he stood and spoke at Independence Hall, telling the American public what they needed to do. And then from there, those 3 places are America's holy places. America was the first country founded on separating church and state to make sure that the church would not create a monarchy in this country. So why was the Roman general standing in America's holy places dictating to Americans what they needed to do? Think about it. From there, he goes to the United Nations. And the United Nations General Assembly ends on the tetrad blood moon. What does he tell the United Nations to do? He had nothing. He actually blesses the United Nations in their effort for the post-2015 development agenda, which is basically what came out of the Pope's 41-page treatise that he issued in October of 2013. October 2nd, to be exact. Now, what happened on 3/13/13 when I could not find anything about it? Couldn't find one significant thing that happened on 3/13/13. Yet I said 3.5 years earlier that it was going to be a significant date. When 3/13/13 came around, the world got its first Jesuit pope on 3/13/13. That's an anomaly for the Catholic Church because a Jesuit cannot hold the rank of holy, quote, holy father and pope. He cannot be the head of the papal see. Now, there is a black pope, but that's the head of the Jesuit order. Now you have a Jesuit as the head of the Holy See, the whole Holy Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican. Now all answers to a Jesuit, and this goes totally contrary to Catholic law. And this Pope has come out of the box like a horse coming out of a racing stall at a full gallop. The first thing he did was attack the monetary system. Then he attacked the way that the world does business. He also did his best to clean up the Vatican Church and went after pedophilia. But we still know it hasn't stopped child trafficking, nor has it stopped 8 million children from vanishing off this planet every year, nor has it stopped Pizzagate. As a matter of fact, the reason why the Pope was in the United States was to show his control that he had over the White House, over the Capitol, and over our independence. Because this is the United States of America Incorporated, and the mother of all corporations is the Vatican. It was Rome. It was the Romans who invented incorporation. It was the church that perfected it. That's true. Rome invented incorporation, but the church perfected it to hold safe their belongings. So here's the thing. I don't care what religion you are, or what religion you claim to be. All religions on this planet, all recognized religions on this planet, are corporations, and all corporations are governed by, guess who? The mother of all corporations, the Holy See. So indeed, every religion on this planet is controlled by the Holy See, or the Vatican, along with all the corporations. There's a lot we don't know about when we start doing the research. It's amazing the stuff that we find. So getting back to the Pope standing in America's holy places, when I saw this, I took immediate action, and then we started our off-the-grid project. We found a piece of property, and we moved up there. We're doing things in concrete, and so when the weather got cold, we came back, got off the grid. But my residency is now officially in the state of Maine. And that's where our project is. I took this seriously enough to move to a place that was remote as possible, where I could have a change of lifestyle, where it wouldn't matter what happens for the next 5 years, because I've got a 5-year plan that I'm following up there. So, the return of Nibiru? Let's go to Revelation. We saw the thing that causes desolation standing in America's holy places. So we know we're getting close. Now here's the thing. This 9th planet, Planet X, Nibiru, whatever this is that's coming this way, is connected to the judgment, not to the judgment of souls, of you and me, us sinners. I love that word, sinner. You know why we're sinners? Because we have imperfect DNA. Hence we are born sinners. Sin has nothing to do with immorality or doing things badly, or doing bad things, I should say. There's a difference. To sin is to miss the mark. So if we were all supposed to have perfect human DNA, and we don't, hence we all have to be sinners. It was a word first used in archery. If you couldn't hit the bullseye, you were a sinner. Think about it. Had nothing to do with immorality. But the church did it, calls us all sinners and then made it all immoral practices. And anything we do, we're sinning, and so we have to pay indulgences or whatever the church demands from its people. The Creator is a loving Father type figure. And how do you pay anything to your Father? You can't. And most fathers love their children unconditionally, even when their children get them upset, angry. They generally don't stop loving their children, especially if they have a perfect bond of love. And we're just infants. We're cosmic infants. We have the rule that's given that 1,000 years of man is but a day to God. So one cosmic day equals 1,000 Earth years, and we have the audacity to think that the cosmos revolves around us. As typical babies or infants think that the world revolves around them, because when they cry, mom or dad or somebody comes and gets them, and so all they have to do is cry and somebody pick them up, because they're the baby. And so we're the baby, but here's the problem. We don't even live one cosmic day. We don't make it past the first cosmic hour. How much does an infant know in its first hour of life? Think about that. How much do we know about the cosmos by the time our lives expire at 70 or 80 years? We're learning more and more because science allows us to do that. But getting back to our subject here, or our subject matter, we're in this change. And as you asked earlier, or as I stated earlier, you asked about Nibiru, and I said, well, I was one of those skeptics until I started doing the research, the biblical research that I've done here. And now this kind of brings us to Revelation, because we're told to leave the cities. There's a reason why we're told to leave the cities. If the lights go out, if there's an EMP and there's no electric in the cities, take a city like New York City, roughly 8 million people living in a densely packed area. That means the toilets don't flush anymore, the refrigerators don't run anymore, the elevators don't run anymore. But you know what's worse? The water doesn't run, the food doesn't get made, whatever food is there starts to rot, so they get to eat well for a couple of days. But if the grid's going to be down for a year or more, you better have a plan B. And then how do you leave the city? How do you get out of the city if there's no gas stations that have electricity to pump the gasoline out of their tank and into yours? Walk, you and 8 other million people in the New York metropolitan area of New York City, Long Island, the Connecticut, Lower New York State, and New Jersey. There are over 20 million people in that condensed area. Where are you going to walk to? And how long are you going to walk without food or water? You see, and those people will turn against themselves and they'll kill each other. You see demonstrations between Black Lives Matter and anti-Trump people. We ain't seen nothing yet. People will be in a state of beta fear, and they will be killing each other in the streets over the last scrap of bread. His first century historian Josephus Flavius wrote that when Rome came in the second time under General Titus in the year 70 and laid siege to the city of Jerusalem, they caught Jerusalem during Passover, while every Jew within the whole area, within pilgrimage distance, went to Jerusalem. Over 2 million people occupied the old city of Jerusalem, and they were trapped there for 3 months. The food was gone relatively quickly, but Josephus Flavius said that women were eating their own children to prevent starvation. When Rome finally laid siege to the city, they murdered 2 million people, took 93,000 captive back to Rome, and leveled the city or razed the city to the ground, just as Jesus had said, not a stone was left upon a stone. And indeed, a Islamic mosque now sits where Solomon's temple and Herod's temples once stood. So we'll have to see if they ever do anything to replace that mosque or not. Time's running out. When we go to Revelation, the 6th chapter, this is the opening of the 6th seal, and it starts off in the 12th verse, and it says, and this is the most descriptive out of all the prophecies. It says, and I saw he opened, this is the Apostle John speaking, he said, I saw he opened the 6th seal, and a great earthquake occurred. Remember increase in earthquakes? Yeah. We've had some beauties over the past several years, and they're becoming stronger and more prevalent around the planet. But this starts off with a great earthquake, the big one. It says, a great earthquake occurred, and the sun became as black as sackcloth made of hair. It's like burlap made of hair, burlap bag. And the entire moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth as when a fig tree shaken by a high wind drops its unripe figs. And the heavens departed as a scroll that is being rolled up. And every mountain and every island were removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the high officials, the military commanders, the rich, the strong, every slave and every free person hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they kept saying to the mountains and to the rocks, fall over us, hide us from the face of the one seated upon the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, because the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? So when we examine what John saw here, again, the sun becomes darkened. Again, the moon becomes as blood. And this time he goes into more detail. The stars fall to the earth as when a fig tree shaken by a high wind drops its unripe figs. Now, we don't have many fig trees in this area, but we do have quite a few oak trees, and in the fall or late summer, we will get some pretty doozy storms, and all of a sudden, you'll have a bunch of immature acorns just laying all over the place, long before they, start to turn brown and fall during the autumn. So it's like, yeah, you wonder if the tree lost half of its acorns at this point. But they're probably the ones that weren't getting a whole lot of nourishment because they really couldn't hold on as well as the others could, so they would just cast away. So they stopped becoming feeders. And so we are seeing stuff fall out of the sky, coming like shooting stars. Like in the amount of, we would see figs falling off trees or nuts being blown off trees. They had a lot of fig trees there, so they used the fig tree expression. But there would be a massive amount of meteor showers. It wouldn't just be, the Leopold meteor showers coming, or one of the, more prevalent meteor showers. And we sit out there for an hour or so, and we watch maybe 15 meteors if we're fortunate to go by. You watch this little shower that takes place. Not going to look like that at all. It's going to be spectacular. The other interesting thing it says with this is that the heavens are rolled up like a scroll. You ever roll up a piece of paper? You can no longer see the writing. And as that paper is rolled up, that writing disappears. So something would be blocking the stars, like coming from one side and going to the other, just as you rolled up a scroll from one end to the other. Those stars would be vanishing, but yet we would see all of this stuff coming into our atmosphere, all these shooting stars or meteorites coming in. Now, what would cause these? It rains iron on a brown dwarf star, and brown dwarf stars have a lot of iron oxide in their path. So says this little documentary that I had seen several years ago. And so we get this sun with wings, this iron brown dwarf star with blowing all this debris in its wake, will certainly seem like one big cloud covering up the sun. Or perhaps it'll rip the outer layer off the sun, just as it's going to try to do with the Earth. Only the Earth is a solid form on the surface. The sun is a gas. It's believed that this Planet X, Nibiru, is like a giant magnet, or will be like a giant magnet when it comes through. Nothing has to impact with Earth. The magnetic force that it provides will do all the damage necessary. And all it has to do really is put out the lights, destroy the electric grid. But chances are it's going to do a lot more, because something is causing earthquakes. And if we have something, a celestial body, entering our solar system, carrying a significant amount of mass, a few things are going to happen. Because we're adding more mass to our solar system, or right to where we are here within the solar system, a very interesting thing is taking place. And this could be a possible explanation as to why the Schumann resonance has increased. And that's the vibration that Earth vibrates, just like our brains vibrate. Earth had been vibrating at 7.8 hertz. Interesting vibration level. When our brain vibrates at 7.8 hertz, we can then communicate with every other intelligent human on the planet who is also at that same level or lower. So there's what we could call a mind of one when we are thinking at that level. But Earth has gone from 7.8 hertz up to, first it went up to the higher 8 levels. I think it was 8.3 is where it sat at for a while. And then it went up to 8.7 and sat there for quite some time. And then it went from 8.7 up to 11, and now is vibrating between 11 and 13. 13 is beta. So the Earth went from a state of delta right through alpha and into a state of beta, where us humans live in a reactionary state and have that fight or flight response. The Earth can go as high, has been seen to go as high as the range into gamma, over 60 hertz per second. This could possibly be caused by CERN. When they turn on that Large Hadron Collider, it could actually make the Schumann resonance of Earth increase. But what normally makes the Earth vibrate are two things. Electromagnetic storms, such as thunderstorms, which are created by the sun, and indeed the sun is the second thing, or actually the first thing, which affects not just Earth, but the whole solar system. And when the sun is perturbed, we have bad weather here. It's solar spots which give us earthquakes and rainstorms. Now, the question is, if we have, well, actually, one other thing has occurred. Scientists have found out that with the increase of the Schumann resonance of all the way up to 13 hertz per second, where it seems to like to vibrate now, at that speed, what they have found is that what was our 24-hour day has now been reduced to somewhere between 15 and 16 hours because of the increase of Schumann resonance. And we know that time changes also due to mass. As mass increases, gravity increases. We have a lot of things that we can't explain going on, including being hit by these helium waves from somewhere that nobody can quite explain, but they're coming from our back, so the diagrams show. There's a lot of evidence that's put together here. When we continue to look, it says every mountain, or at the scripture of Revelation 6, chapter, the 12th verse, or actually now, let's see, we're up to verse 15. And you got to love this. Actually, the latter part of 14. It says every mountain and every island was removed from its place. We've seen situations like that happen with Mount St. Helena blowing a top off, with the earthquake that we had back, was it 2004, 2005, I believe it was, which caused that massive tsunami throughout the Pacific and Indonesia. That was an earth move. That was part of the plate actually popping up. Scientists say due to subduction, but whatever. So we see the islands themselves being affected, coming up out of the water, sinking under the water. But verse 15 starts on, I forgot to mention volcanic activity. Lots and lots of volcanic activity currently going on. Why are all these things happening at the same time? One has to have a reason, or I should say there's a reason that these things are happening. There's got to be a cause. Things don't just happen because of nothing. There's, as Newton said, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So something is causing these things to happen. But the interesting thing here in verse 15 is John saw what we've all learned about. These deep underground bunkers, DUMBs, the deep ground military bunkers, or now what we know are underground cities with high-speed railways in them, supersonic railways, underground farms where they could grow their own food. And who are these for? The everyday people? No. As John says, then the kings of the earth, the high officials, the military commanders, the rich, the strong, and it says, and every slave and every free person hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. Exactly what we see going on. Putin's being a little bit more kind to his people in Russia because they've been building underground bunkers for the public around Moscow, like there's been no tomorrow. I don't know if they're doing the same thing in Kiev, but I'll tell you, if the Moscow underground is anything like the underground in Kiev, it's deep. It's close to, I'd say close to about between 500 and 1,000 feet deep. And that's just the railway system. That's just the railway system. As a matter of fact, when a friend of mine, when we were in Kiev, we went down into the subway under Kiev, and I've never been on an escalator so long in my life. I was waiting for a red man and a man in a red costume and a pitchfork to be greeting me at the bottom. It was a long ride down. I'm being facetious here, but yeah, it was a really long ride down. But Moscow's expanding these things. I have not heard of one program that the U.S. has for any of our residents. As a matter of fact, there's a remarkable increase in the sale of build your own bunkers, just like there was back in the 50s when we expected nuclear annihilation from Russia. And we don't have to worry about nuclear annihilation from Russia. The other thing that we have, well, let me continue with this and we'll close out this last verse. But we know these underground cities exist. We know that they're for the elite. We know that we don't have an invitation. At least nobody has told us where to go yet. And we can also pretty much figure out that we're left to our own devices on this. If we are not preparing, if we don't have some sort of a plan, if we don't get out of harm's way, we are going to get caught up with this, with the masses of people who don't have a clue. You know, Russell, your listeners are so privileged to get this information from you, and you are doing your listeners such a service to bring this information to them, because this is truly life-saving. Not just this show, but all the shows that you do.
We also did the disaster preparedness show with Matthew Stein.
Excellent speaker, good friend of mine. I like Matthew very much. Gotta like his book. As a matter of fact, I could see my copy from where I'm sitting.
Isn't that a great book?
Oh yeah, if you've read, you can't just read that book. You have to study it. Letters to Earth, you can survive. The future is yours. Sorry, Letters to Earth, the future is yours. You can read and you can understand. That's the book that I wrote, which explains quite a bit of this and where we're headed. My youngest reader that I know of was 16. My oldest, 96. Great target audience. 16 to 96. You got to love that target audience. And the 16-year-old had a lot of questions. It was like I was giving a class. It was great. The person who was 96 said it was the greatest book they ever read. One of the greatest books they ever read. I had somebody else who actually was a good friend of mine. Her mother was deathly ill, and so I gave her a copy of the manuscript before the book was even published. And the word that I got back was that, well, it took 4 pots of coffee in 12 hours, but she had read the greatest book she'd ever read. And this was from a 72-year-old woman. So there's a lot of great information in that. You can find it in Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, or your better bookstores around the place, or you can go to my website and for a small donation, we'll send you a PDF copy of it because times are rough. I know everybody needs this information. We really do. We have a fantastic future. This is just the judgment of of this current satanic system of evil going away. It's the judgment of the establishment which put people like Hillary Clinton into power and almost made her the president of the United States. Thank goodness people started to wake up. Not that I dabble in politics at all, because my kingdom is not of this world. However, I hate to see the planet destroyed more than what it's already being destroyed. So we have to look at what's going on here and start to make decisions for ourselves, because the kings of the earth, the high officials, the military commanders, and the rich and strong have already made their plans. And so we have to pretty much do the same as make our plans. And now this is all related right back to what we would call the judgment, as I said. But it's this judgment of this satanic system of evil. It's the judgment of those who would rather go up and protest and beat people up to show that they're right by a way of might and force. It's a system which allows us to drop bombs on innocent people, blowing up children and destroying cities and that they live in. It's a system which has given us child sacrifice and everything that goes along with that. It's a system which has given us more control systems than what we can possibly bear. Everything from government to religion to taxation. And it happens on so many different levels. Most people aren't even aware of the amount of control levels that are upon us. I explained that in Letters to Earth. So here we are. Here we are. Where does that bring us? Russell, with these scriptures and my explanation, what would be your opinion of, do we have a Planet X or a Nibiru headed this way?
Well, this is the way I see it. Regardless if you believe in science or if you believe in the Bible, the EMP is a reality either way.
Oh, without a doubt.
So you need to be prepared.
Without a doubt. And that's something that we can't argue.
Honestly, that's not about just having the food and the weapons and all that. You need to be emotionally, spiritually, all the way, all around prepared.
Most people are not aware that the Earth got hit with an EMP back in the 1800s. I think it was, 1857, 58, right around there?
Event?
Yeah, this is the one that melted telegraph lines. Now, think about that. They didn't have any transistors or microchips at that time, computer chips. They had heavy copper cable telephone lines that they were running, or telegraph lines, and it melted the lines. The lines got so hot, they literally melted. And that was just from a solar EMP. And we're past due. NASA said we're past due. And NASA currently, I watched an interview about 2 weeks ago, and they had this NASA scientist saying, "Oh, well, the sun's been very quiet here for this time period. We're not really seeing a lot of activity." And really, you for real, buddy? You're just lying through your teeth, aren't you? Because we're seeing the results of the sun's activity. You look at some of the different SOHO 1 and 2 and the different telescopes that they have looking at the sun. So you see huge gaping holes where there's been plasma ejections from the sun's surface. Oh, there's nothing going on in the sun. Don't look here. It's like, what do you take us for, fools? And this is going out. This is being broadcast to on the news. Quiet time period on the sun. Don't count it. Something's perturbing all of the planets, not just Earth. We've had a marked increases in volcanic activity, a tremendously marked increase in volcanic in earthquakes. And we don't just get one earthquake anymore or a couple aftershocks. They come in the hundreds. There was another flurry in the Salton Sea in Southern California. When I didn't keep track of this last flurry of earthquakes that they had gotten over several days, but the one before that they had about 2 years ago, they had over 650 earthquakes in one concentrated area in Southern California, right next to the Salton Sea, which is known to be a magma hotspot, or believed to be a magma hotspot. So why all of a sudden are all these things cropping up? One of the most volcanic areas and earthquake-prone areas on the planet are the Canary Islands. You will never, ever, ever see the USGS give any earthquake data on the Canary Islands. It just doesn't happen. The Canary Islands in Puerto Rico, which is also seismically active, every day in Puerto Rico, you've got at least 4 to 6 earthquakes going off. Every day. Between the Canary Islands and the Puerto Rican Trench, either one of them could cause a massive tsunami for the east coast of the United States, becoming most deadly right within New York City harbor because of the way that New Jersey and Long Island are shaped. It's like one big funnel. It'll all go right in there. It's estimated that if the Canary Islands, it's Mount, shucks, I forgot which mountain was over there. They've got one that's cooking away. Mount St. Palma is the one that they fear. It's got a crack in it already. They fear that, and it's part of it slid off into the ocean before. It's a possibility. The other part can slide off any time. It could have already slid off while we're talking. Who knows? But that is the big one. That one they estimate a 200-foot tsunami. The one out of the Puerto Rican Trench, they're estimating between 100 to 120 feet if that one launched a tsunami. Great. So if you live within 20 miles of the coast of the eastern United States, you're pretty well screwed. That includes the New York metropolitan area, which has over 20 million people in it. Actually, you need to be above 1,000 feet to be safe. If this Nibiru does exist, or Planet X, and it comes swinging past us in a close trajectory, it will pull the water right out of the seabeds. The oceans will be pulled right out onto the land. Not completely, but you'll have such a high gravitational pull on the oceans that it'll make the normal tides look like nothing because of this huge magnet. And it does have the capability of switching our poles. So our magnetic poles. So there's a lot of Earth changes, a lot of Earth activity that's going on that the government's covering over that, we pick up bits and pieces of here and there. One of those things are chemtrails, which I just want to mention briefly. This goes back to the day is coming that is burning like the furnace, as it says in Malachi. If we didn't have chemtrails, the Earth would be considerably hotter. Now, I'm not saying chemtrails are a good thing, because They're not just spraying aluminum and barium into the upper atmosphere. And the aluminum and the barium that they are spraying is actually crystallizing, returning back to Earth in crystalline form. And what scientists are finding is that once these crystals are taken up inside vegetation, it stops the vegetative growth process. The plant stops producing because the crystals start absorbing the sunlight, and photosynthesis comes to a halt. It's believed that these same crystals, because can be activated using RF frequencies from cell towers or HARP or whatever they want to bombard us with, including Wi-Fi in our own computers in our own homes, if you have a smart meter on your house. But these crystals can actually be triggered to vibrate, and with nanobot technology, it's believed that we've also sucked up a bunch of nanobots, and they can be programmed or triggered using RF frequencies. So if that's true, we're pretty well screwed just by what the government's doing themselves. And now they want to roll out 4 and 5G cellular, which essentially puts Wi-Fi on every street corner in the United States. So we've got more RF frequencies coming to bombard us with more. Essentially, we're sitting in a microwave oven with the door open and the oven on. We're not getting hit quite with microwave, but it's so close to microwave that it just takes longer to get the same reaction, is basically it. It's just a slight spectrum down from microwave, just a hair under microwave. That's where the all cellular transmissions take place. So when you're holding up a cell phone next to your head, you're getting a low dose of microwave radiation, which really isn't going to hurt you as much as when you've given your kid a cell phone who's 5, 6, 7 years old, their brain's still under development, still developing. You're basically radiating their brain, and we can pretty much figure that these kids, with as much time as they use their cell phones and smartphones, that they're going to be pretty well brain damaged by the time they reach their 40s or 50s. A lot of brain tumor and brain cancer coming up because they've been given these devices at such an early age. I was in the cellular industry for 15 years, communications industry for 15 years. I was in cellular when it first came out, and I was in cellular when my career ended, or when I met an unfortunate circumstance which ended my career in cellular, in telecommunications. Anyway, so I was there from one end to the other. Basically, it was around 2001 when I kind of got retired. But I had followed all of the information that was coming out at that time, of all the studies that were being done about cell phones and brain cancer. And all of the studies were inconclusive. However, you got a fledgling industry, and all the studies were being done on adults, not on children. Since 2000, there's been a lot more research on the developing brains of children with cell phones, and what they're finding is a trend for brain cancer. So don't give a cell phone to a child. I wouldn't give one to a teenager unless you had to, at least not a permanent one. But every kid's got a cell phone now, so if yours is the only one that doesn't, there's going to be a lot of peer pressure at school, sadly to say. So that's just one of the dangers that we have to be aware of. But all of these things that we're being hit with are all things to dumb us down, so we don't pay attention to the world events that are going on around us. And so people, there's a big push to try to get people to move back into cities. Why? So there's less to deal with afterward. In EMP, we don't have to worry about an Armageddon. We have to be more concerned about an EMP. We're not the ones that have direct judgment upon us. It's the leaders and the rulers of this planet and the rebel satanic alien forces, those aliens that have been working with the military, that have been given the government, the governors, their authority, those who cohabitate with royalty in the same body or vessel, human vessel. You know, we've heard shapeshifter, 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 and it's like one of those things that have just kind of gone away. Yeah, it's not much of a shapeshifter as you think, because they are living inside a human vessel with the original soul for that vessel. Princess Diana may have said it best when she talked about the Queen and Prince Philip as being reppies. It's alleged that she tried to commit suicide 3 times while she was carrying Prince William. And she is also quoted as saying that she has seen both the Queen and Prince Philip change from the human form that we see them as into reptilian-looking creatures, henceforth the name Reppies. And they told her if she ever told anyone, they would kill her. Well, she did, and they did. She told her maidservant or her secretary, I forget exactly what position this woman played, but she was like the lady in waiting for Princess Diana, and that woman put it in her personal memoirs of Diana. So there's a lot of mystery that goes along with there. So the one point that I want to make is that this is the judgment period for these people and for the alien negative ETs that are with us now. And if we're part of this system, then we won't look forward to being part of the return of the King of Kings and armies of the heavens, or the armies of the cosmos. So this is what we're facing here. And this is most important. It's a regime change for planet Earth. And all of this stuff that we're living now is going to go away and replaced by that 1,000-year reign of peace. The good thing is we get our DNA repaired, and we no longer we are no longer sinners. So with that, I will say, have a fantastic day. Letters to Earth. The future is yours. You have to take action first. Love and blessings to all.